Have you ever had one of those days where you're just completely wiped out? I mean, absolutely exhausted. But the exact second your head hits the pillow, boom, your brain just jolts wide awake. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're not just giving you standard tips on getting better rest. We're going to decode the hidden operating system that governs your body. We're uncovering the invisible biological forces that are actively shaping your sleep, your aging, and honestly, the trajectory of your entire life. So let's dive into this profound biological mystery. Why does our modern brain so intensely resist the one thing it desperately needs?
Right off the bat, we've got to look at this fundamental paradox. Why does an exhausted brain actively fight sleep? Well, to find the answer, we have to look way beneath just the symptom of being tired. See, in our modern world, chronic stress keeps us in this bizarre state of being wired and tired, and we usually just brush off our inability to sleep as, a frustrating annoyance. But it's actually a vital clue. It's a massive signal that the unending perceived threats in our daily lives have literally stripped away our body's mechanical ability to shift into recovery mode.
And that brings us to the core mechanism beneath it all, nervous system dysregulation. Now, the absolute crucial thing to grasp here is that this isn't just about feeling stressed. It's a literal structural loss of your neurological flexibility. When you're constantly bombarded by modern stressors, your system gets completely flooded with cortisol. And what that does is it essentially jams your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, in the on position. Your baseline biology gets totally scrambled, and your body actually forgets how to physically transition back into a rest and digest state.
Now, Section 1, the default mode network. Let's look at the specific neurological culprit that fires up the exact second you try to get some rest.
So discovered by neurologist Marcus Reichel, the default mode network, or DMN, is basically this interconnected system of brain regions, including your prefrontal cortex, and it lights up specifically when you are not focused on the outside world. Here's the crazy part. Simply trying to sleep actually triggers this network. If your nervous system is already dysregulated, this network doesn't just, quietly hum in the background. No, it completely hijacks your brain, and it locks your prefrontal cortex into a state of incredibly high cognitive arousal.
As Psychology Today points out, the DMN is heavily involved in introspection and episodic memory processing. So, when it's fueled by a hyperactive amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection center, the DMN morphs into this runaway rumination engine. It starts processing every single past regret, every future anxiety, and it actively blocks the physiological onset of sleep. Your brain literally believes that it is not safe to power down. How wild is that?
Moving on to Section 2, hacking the vagus nerve. Let's talk about how we can override this rumination and actually take back control of our neurobiology. When you put these two biological states side by side, it's night and day. In the sympathetic state, you've got elevated cortisol and a totally hyperreactive amygdala. To escape that, we literally have to force our biology into the parasympathetic state, which is driven by vagal nerve activation. We have to intentionally trigger what Harvard's Dr. Herbert Benson called the relaxation response. Because here's the thing, you can't just wish yourself to sleep. You have to mechanically pull the lever that pulls your body out of fight or flight and drops it into rest and digest. And one of the absolute best ways to pull that lever is through the vagus nerve. Let's zoom right into the physical mechanics of the 4-7-8 breathwork protocol. It's simple. You exhale completely, inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. But why that specific ratio? Well, it's because a prolonged exhale, compared to the inhale, mechanically forces your vagus nerve to stimulate. It physically drops your heart rate and lowers your blood pressure, which directly neutralizes all that chaotic, buzzing energy up in your prefrontal cortex. Another incredibly powerful clinical intervention is non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR. You just lie down, methodically relax your muscles, and keep a focused awareness on pure resting, without letting yourself slip prematurely into stage 1 sleep. The hidden mechanism here is just brilliant. NSDR trains your nervous system to stay calm but aware, so you're actively lowering your body's biological threshold for sleep initiation. By doing this, it makes it so much easier to actually drift off when night finally rolls around. All right, Section 3. Clinical sleep sanctuary protocols. Because your biology doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Your physical environment is an active part of your biological operating manual.
Building a true sleep sanctuary comes down to a strict clinical checklist, and every single environmental parameter has a direct biological mechanism. Take ambient temperature, for example. Keeping your room between 65 and 68 degrees isn't just about being cozy, it actually forces a core thermoregulatory drop in your body, which is a hard biological requirement for melatonin synthesis. And things like blackout shades or white noise, they prevent those tiny microarousals that can instantly snap your brain right back into the default mode network. Then we've got to look at behavioral boundaries, specifically the 3-2-1 consumption rule. You stop drinking alcohol 3 hours before bed, stop eating 2 hours before, and cut out liquids 1 hour before. The consequence that most people completely miss here is the domino effect of late consumption. Eating or drinking late triggers nighttime digestion and gastroesophageal reflux. That subtly spikes your heart rate and fires up your sympathetic nervous system at the exact moment you need it shutting down. Now, if you're doing all this and you still can't fall asleep, you gotta use the 30-minute rule. If you've been lying awake for 30 minutes, get out of bed immediately. I know, it sounds counterintuitive, right? But lying in bed, awake and frustrated, literally turns your mattress into a conditioned stimulus for stress and anxiety. You're essentially hardwiring your brain to view your bed as a stress zone instead of a recovery zone. We definitely don't want that.
Section 4. Midnight Awakening Restorative Interventions. So, what exactly happens when you do everything right, but you still jolt awake at 3 a.m.? Well, when you wake up in the middle of the night, the absolute most dangerous thing you can do is check the clock. Doing that stimulates immediate cortical arousal and just floods you with anxiety about losing sleep. Instead, clinicians strongly recommend lower body sensorial mapping. By focusing really deeply on the physical sensations in your toes, your calves, your hips, you actually shift your brain's processing power away from the worry centers of the prefrontal cortex and into the primary somatosensory cortex. You literally break the cognitive worry cycle by forcing your brain to change locations. It's amazing. Another incredibly effective intervention is pairing winter cabin imagery with retrograde counting. So you visualize a perfectly quiet winter scene, watching your thoughts dissolve like snowflakes hitting a lake, all while counting your breaths backward from 10 to 1. The hidden mechanism here is so clever. The imagery recruits the spatial networks in your brain, which actively suppresses the default mode network. Meanwhile, counting backward bogs down your working memory, slowing your cognitive processing speed right down to a crawl. Okay, let's bring it all together in Section 5, Neuroplasticity and Long-Term Longevity. We're zooming out to the macro level to see how these nightly routines actually rewire the physical architecture of your brain. This data reveals such a profound biological truth. Consistent relaxation practices literally drive long-term neuroplastic remodeling. Over time, things like mindfulness and sleep regulation actually increase the gray matter density in your anterior cingulate cortex. That's the area that handles emotional regulation. And at the exact same time, it physically shrinks the gray matter volume in your amygdala. You are quite literally downsizing your brain's threat detection center. The result? You become vastly more resilient to everyday stressors. And you want to know the most incredible part? It only takes 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes of daily mindfulness starts creating this physiological reflex. By actively training your body to tap into that parasympathetic state during the day, you're paving a new neurological pathway. You're teaching your nervous system how to summon calm on demand. And that makes it infinitely easier to trigger that relaxation response when you actually need it at night. So, we've seen how sleep influences hormones, how hormones drive our emotions, how those emotions dictate our behavior, and how that behavior ultimately shapes our physical neurobiology. It's all connected. So I want to leave you with this one provocative question to think about. How is your daily stress processing actively writing the biological blueprint of your future aging? Because mastering this hidden operating system, it's not just about getting a good night's rest. It's the ultimate key to unlocking your long-term longevity, your metabolic health, and your true human potential. Think about that tonight as you set up your sleep sanctuary. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.